Hey everyone, welcome back to the Coffee People Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. This is the show presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging and is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network. Please go to roastwestcoast.com to find recaps of our episodes, our Coffee Smarter podcast, and so much more content. On this show, we connect with guests who are part of the coffee industry somehow, even tangentially. We share the stories of entrepreneurship, motivation, their challenges and inspirations, often with a great cup of coffee. Today I'm actually drinking an AeroPress espresso-like shot of Yeah No Yeah coffee. Just a reminder, Yeah No Yeah is our collaboration with Relative Coffee Company in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm really proud of this coffee, which is a blend of Ethiopia and Colombia. And if you'd like to give it a try, you can find the link to the Relative Coffee Company shop in this podcast show notes, in our link tree on Instagram, on our website. It's everywhere. And now we've got a show to do. Our guest today is Chris Deferio. He's a longtime coffee industry gentleman who for the past 8 years has been offering up his knowledge as a consultant for more than 80 coffee shop owners and businesses. And also, he's been hosting the Keys to the Shop podcast. There are more than 900 episodes that offer clarity and actionable tools for cafe owners and coffee industry members. It's a really good show. I'm a follower, and if you want to follow Keys to the Shop, I'll share the links in this podcast show notes, or if you're listening in our newsletter, found at roastwestcoast.com, just scroll down a little bit. You'll see those links and much more. You can also search for Keys to the Shop on every major podcast platform. Okay. We're past the details, and I'm sure you've filled your mug with a great cup of coffee. And we're ready to get this show on the road. So thanks for joining me for another Coffee People conversation. This one with Chris Deferio, the podcast host and business consultant behind Keys to the Shop, based in Louisville, Kentucky. I actually like reaching out to other podcasters because I listen to podcasts, hours and hours of them a day, and I'm always excited to hear other people and how they do things and their approach. And so I've been lucky to have a bunch of different podcasters on this show. I'd love to start this episode by having you tell everyone what your name is, kind of where you're located, and what it is you consider your role to be, your job title to be.
My name is Chris Deferio, and I've been in the business of coffee now for 25 years, and I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I am the founder, president, host, and everything else at Keys to the Shop. It's a podcast and consulting company, and spend most of my time doing consulting and coaching for coffee shops and owners and operators and even management teams. And of course, producing podcasts. And we're at about 900 plus podcasts right now over the course of about 8 years of doing it almost. It will be in January 7th is our 8th year. So yeah, it's another era, another phase of my career that I'm excited to get to do.
Well, I'm honored that you're here with me. I'm only halfway through that 8-year plan. I'm on my own, so I'm still a rookie as far as that's concerned. I've been listening to your show recently and appreciating it both for its, the quality of the content, but the content itself, the discussions about hospitality, which I love to have and I've been through and experienced, but it's nice to hear from someone else. Sometimes you think you're alone out there in the world. You mentioned you had this long career in coffee. I'm wondering if you could go back in time, was there kind of a first experience that got you started down the coffee path that made you think, yeah, I'm into this?
Yeah. I think it's historically been one of those questions that I've answered with a 20 something year old Chris in a small coffee shop, reading philosophy and journaling and, discovering the air pot in the corner of the cafe and figuring out that I could taste the difference between the different coffees there, but the vibe of the space and the the energy was what drew me, because it was, what they call joint solitude. You're with people, you can be with people in conversation, you can go over somewhere by yourself with your thoughts. And it was really attractive to me. I had spent a year in a ministry school in the Midwest, and I had nothing else to do afterwards. It was kind of a spinning wheels time for my life. And before, though, I drank coffee because my grandmother had, this habit of smoking a cigarette in her kitchen table and having a coffee for breakfast and cracking open the window. So if, little Chris, was there, I didn't really have a lot of coffee, but I did have some black coffee with her. She cracked the window open. And I think that's probably one of those core memories that helped get me started. But the real revelation was tasting the difference between the coffees, like the Papua New Guinea, the Guatemala, and not knowing what to do with my life. I had time to research coffee and became kind of a coffee nerd. And this is the day, time of coffee where there were still some really active coffee forums like coffeed.com. Coffeegeek.com is still around, but it was in its heyday around these times. And so you just plunge yourself into these alt.coffee early Google group conversations. And that's where I discovered specialty coffee, where I knew there was a guy named David Schomer in the Northwest who was doing this thing called latte art, where you make pictures with milk. And he had a VHS tape, and I had his book. And yeah, it was great. And I was in the Midwest traveling from Arkansas to Tulsa. And in Tulsa, I chanced an espresso at a cafe called Nordagio's, who was serving Cafe Vita at the time. And this must have been somewhere in it was like 2000 or something like that. I had already kind of gotten a job in coffee and then got fired because I was just passionate but useless as a barista, but I was still pursuing it. But the the specialty part of this story is I had a macchiato at this place, like one of these like traditional, kind of poured with a little rosette on the top. And it was stunning. It was just unbelievable. I literally ordered 4 more of these things. And it was, my constitution was much better for coffee back then, I think. But it was a ritual of mine to travel 2 hours to Tulsa to have 5 macchiatos and spend the whole day at the cafe reading and drinking coffee and getting in my palate, in my heart, in my mind, this taste mixed with this history of what I loved about the coffee shop environment that would guide me for a very long time for my career in coffee. I just decided one day, this is what I'm going to do. And I never looked back. And it's the only career I've ever had.
I'm guessing at that time, gas prices weren't $6 to $7 a gallon in Oklahoma, but that
No,
just me.
for some reason, it was much more reasonable to me to travel.
So you make this decision. I'm going to have this
Mhm.
career in coffee. Where does that lead you? You've already been fired once. What's the next step?
Yeah. Well, I was despondent at that, of course. And funny enough, all these years later, in my career, I had the owners of that shop on for a Founder Friday episode of my show. This was a place called Arcega's in Fayetteville, Arkansas. You know, I always say I would have fired me too. It's just one of those things. From there, I just popped around from mom and pop shop to little, roasteries and grocery store coffee bar at Wegmans in upstate New York. I'm from Syracuse, New York originally. So um, I just got the odd jobs basically and brought with me a lot of coffee passion. And so obviously this is how it works often now, even with the saturation of coffee education. Still, if you find someone super passionate about coffee, it's a green flag, right? You're like, okay, yeah, you're really passionate about coffee. Back then, it was very strange. You don't find
Mhm.
people like that. It's like finding another wizard on the road. Just like don't see those very often. So I remember going to Coffee Fest on a sort of quest to learn more about coffee. It was a flight to Seattle. I stayed at a hostel and just was drinking it in. And I actually brought my micro cassette recorder at the time. I still have it at my desk here. Uh, to sort of corner David Schomer in his own shop and ask him questions about opening a coffee shop. So I interviewed him back then, and he encouraged me to just get a job in specialty coffee because I was going to move to Seattle. And so I happened to run into a place called Gimme Coffee near where I lived, and they found out I was really passionate about coffee and latte art. They gave me the job as a barista, and from there, my career started to get involved with latte art competitions. I won the first one I entered, and I ended up teaching a lot of latte art at Coffee Fest afterwards, and was a champion of that particular competition 2 more times. And I became a trainer and wholesale trainer at Gimme Coffee and helped them develop their first manual for the barista training. And from there, I moved on. I quit that job and moved to Carriage House Cafe, which was a French bakery and cafe with dinner and a jazz club, and also a coffee bar, which I was a director of coffee for. And that really, in that time of my life, was a time of exploring what it meant to have sway as a teacher, and not always a great teacher, because I was a competition person and I could be belligerent, I could be demanding, and I thought it was a noble cause. But at the time, I wasn't, as I say today, really people first. I was technical first. I
Mm-hmm.
was tamp evenly first, that kind of stuff. And I thought it was all in a good cause. But you're young, you're passionate, and you learn. And I guess that kind of sums up my career up to that point. Was a very steep learning curve of passion developing into real skill, developing into a, a more human skill, a skill with people that actually got that knowledge and instruction to stick. Long story short, I left that job to get married, moved to Indiana, had some more coffee jobs, and got involved in operations
Mm-hmm.
management, cafe management, and continued to teach and compete. 2007, I was USBC fourth place in Long Beach, and eventually just decided that after a long time of managing multiple cafes as an operations manager, like managing managers and developing systems for a place here in Louisville, where I ended up staying now for 10 years, I wanted to get back into the industry to get a creative outlet, but to give to the industry the thing that I really was helped by in all of these years of development, which was podcasts and resources that were outside of coffee. They were management podcasts and leadership books and things like that. But when I searched for coffee podcasts back in 2015 and 2016, there were some, and of course, the Cat and Cloud guys were out there, and but nothing that was specifically focused on really strategic and actionable takeaways for operation of a coffee shop, so to speak. So that's where Keys to the Shop was born in the year of 2016 and launched in 2017. That kind of sums up, hopefully, well enough, some 25 years
Certainly.
of coffee.
When you start going through it, you start to realize the weight of 25 years. There's a lot of experience there, and to decide where the turning points are is important. But at some point, it becomes a collection of all these experiences that define who you are. And as I was listening, I was thinking about my own path and kind of seeing it through your words there. The transition from uh, passion and energy and learning skills and driving into transitioning into leadership, which is,
Yeah.
you know, having a skill and being able to share it is not the same as being able to lead people to discover it for themselves or to retain it or to perfect it even more than you did. And it takes a different type of motivation. And I think that takes a lot of time to learn that. You just mentioned there weren't a lot of coffee podcasts in 2016, 2017. I think even when this show started 4 years ago, if you Googled coffee podcasts, you'd come up with maybe 4 or 5 kind of shows that were core shows. I just did that again this week, and the list was 5 Google pages long, and maybe 60 shows that have the word coffee in them, just as
Yeah.
a base. So there's certainly been an expansion. I think of it like like coffee shops, there's always another coffee shop, and there's generally a place for it. And most shows will, there's a place for every show. And for me, I welcome that because it's someone else to talk to, and it's interesting. Keys to the Shop became more than just sharing your knowledge on a podcast, it's consulting. How did you put those two together?
Yeah. You know, when I first won that latte art competition, I started to get people that wanted me to like work their booth at the National Restaurant Association show in Chicago and stuff. And of course, I'm like, oh, you're going to pay me what, and to pour latte art, and just I'll do whatever. I'm like this. I'm like the coffee pool boy or whatever for these brands, and that was what I thought consulting was. I'm an expert in this field, and so I had like the Vista print cards made, and I'm just like not very experienced in the ups and downs and personal trials and triumphs that are necessary to gain wisdom to be able to guide other people. But I tried, it failed, and that was a good thing. So after a lot more of a gauntlet, in my career, I developed, to, through just life and coffee experience and management failures and successes, this podcast that taught me that basically when you do a podcast, and I'm sure you can relate to this, you realize after a little bit that it's actually helping you as well to realize what you've learned. Whereas without that thinking about what you have learned, you probably would just undersell yourself and your experiences. But by even just interviewing other people and coming up with questions, and then maybe I do a lot of solo episodes as well, I started to realize that it wasn't really about the ego wasn't part of it. As far as why I started consulting, it was more like I want to be more helpful than simply presenting a podcast, which is helpful. And we've had lots of people say that it's been helpful over their careers or the starting of their coffee shops, etc. But helping people now looked a lot more humble, looked a lot more like being a servant to their success through the failures and successes of my own career, but also through my education of doing the show, because the show itself is an R&D tool that surveys that are put out by organizations could only hope to accomplish.
Hmm.
The aggregation of wisdom that you get over the course of hundreds of episodes is monumental. The consulting part started with just what I think it was an inquiry about consulting, and I said yes to it. And my wife had to convince me to even promote consulting on the show because I was just so in this mindset of I really don't want to talk about myself. I really just want to showcase the best, what I think it might be the best thinking and ways to have this thriving coffee shop part of our industry, because I believe the coffee shop is a very uh, pivotal part of the supply stream. Like the trade of coffee eventually ends up in the hand of a consumer. And, we don't always get it right. And some of those things are preventable. And so we try to get people on the show to talk about, what did we learn? And maybe you can start at a higher level from our wisdom. And consulting is like that, but times 100, because now it's me and the a couple or the individual or the team really hashing out in detail over the course of many many hours specific things that are either issues or challenges or opportunities that can be stewarded a certain way to produce a result that is good for as good for everybody as it possibly can be, profitable, thriving for all people involved. So that's the start of consulting. And so I just started promoting it. And of course, when you have a podcast that, has a larger listening base, and a very narrow range of professionals, a very niche podcast. So owners and operators and management listen to this. It started to produce more leads. And so that's how it kind of developed. So that's how I spend most of my time now.
I was going to ask you, how you keep current on like what's working and what doesn't and what the state of the industry is, but I think you kind of just answered it.
Hmm.
You have this collective knowledge coming on your show. And as part of this show, you're exploring things in real time, and adding it to the foundation you've already built over, a long career in the industry.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, in addition to that, is I still, for this will be my 20th year speaking at Coffee Fest. Although these days I am speaking on leadership and management and other things in cafe design and stuff like that. But I've been at these shows maybe 70 some odd times over the course of 20 years. So you also get that perspective of, that shift in the industry, et cetera. So that's the other aspect, is staying actually active in the industry.
I think about I think about core things in hospitality, and I think a lot of those core things haven't changed. Being able to provide an experience, being a place that people want to spend their time when they're not at home or at work or wherever. A lot of that has stayed the same over decades, periods of time. How we get there has changed, and that's certainly something that we're all kind of growing with. I do have a selfish question I want to ask you right now. It's something I've been thinking about all day, knowing this was coming, and it wasn't on any sort of list I sent you. And so you just holler at me if you're like, I don't think so. But that being said, I was having a pretty bad day this morning, and everyone has bad days, frustration days. But when you're in the hospitality space, a bad day can cause more challenges than merely just being frustrated for yourself in a cubicle somewhere.
Yeah.
Uh, when you are talking with your clients, when you are meeting with hospitality people, and I know a lot of the questions are going to be, like you mentioned, cafe design or creating a functional financial system, so that they are tracking things properly. But there's also this forward facing part of handling the emotion of being a human being working with other human beings.
Hmm.
Does that come up in your consulting? Is that part of it? Is it more about the nuts and bolts of what people do?
You know, I like to think of this as a lot of us got into coffee because we loved like the sugary drinks, and it got us in there. And then all of a sudden we start drinking black coffee and we're connoisseurs, right? Um, a lot of times what gets people into consulting or coaching is a felt need for something very technical and practical. It might be a spreadsheet. It might be, what espresso machine should I get? And in my conversations with people, almost 100% of the time, the real issue that's at hand that feeds into either the dysfunction and the burnout or the functionality and the thriving is going to be the emotional side. And we do talk about it. It's not therapy, I'm not a licensed therapist, but I to your point, there's a lot of emotional labor that goes on in coffee shops. You're dealing with the public, and not only are you dealing with their emotions, it's your own, and you have a limited supply of energy. And so we talk a lot about the dynamics between people and relationships. And I mean a lot, because everything else that you have, the tools, the machines, the systems, they're all servants to something that's not a machine. It's a person, it's a system that supports people. And so we start often in our conversations with the idea of, well, what are the values of this business that you will uphold that will help you in the times where everyone's low, but we have sort of an agreement together, and we've built trust together that we're supporting one another to fulfill some part of these values. Like kindness might be an aspirational value for a coffee shop. We want to show kindness to our community. Well, sometimes your community sucks, and they want you know and you like to think about that on paper as like, yeah, this looks amazing, but then when you're face to face with the opportunity to show kindness, it's much harder. And if you don't look that as full in the face as you can before you actually get into it, you're going to be so taken aback by it that it's going to take all of your extra bandwidth to just adjust yourself, let alone manage this thing that you've, you know, agreed to do. You agreed to open a coffee shop. You signed the lease. You did this thing. You hired these people. You said, we will pay you. The pressure starts to mount. And the wheels of progress are so greased in the industry to get you to open a coffee shop as quickly and easily as you possibly can. And I see myself as a set of brakes or a throttle to get people to at least take a second or a few months to think about what do you actually want to do? How can you fulfill the promise you're making to the people who come in the shop and the people you employ,
Mm-hmm.
and the promise you have to yourself? So I guess that's, part of what I do is to coach people. So there's two things. Consulting is me telling you what I think you should do. In my experience, you should, measure your countertops to be ergonomically, so high or so deep. That's consulting. Coaching is more to the relational side of things and helping people explore things that often they already know, but because of hustle culture or an inability to handle the unique kind of pressure that entrepreneurship brings, um, they forget about those things, and you often are finding yourself having to remind them, and they're like, okay, this was really clarifying, so we clarify these things. So yes, that is a huge part.
I came across these terms people first and actionable, and it's kind of the combination of those two things. We're engaging with people, and then we have a plan of action for how this is all going to work in the long run. You hear a lot of people say, I want to open a cafe, I want to open a bar, I want to kind of get into that world. And the reality of that is it's great in theory, and you have to really fight through a lot of tough and stressful things to get there, just to get the doors open.
Yeah.
So having, as somebody who is deeply invested in his own therapy, having an outside source to look at it and bounce ideas off of and let you know when you're going off the deep end is certainly a value add. I'm wondering, as you look back on this time and, I'm forcing you to take the other side of the microphone here for a minute, how have things changed for you? Does this experience you have now change what it's like for you to go into a cafe or a restaurant? Are you able to do that without really thinking about how you would fix things, how you would change things, how you would
I
modify
don't know
them?
if I've ever been able to do that, but I have resigned myself. The old version of me that was way more just agitated, I'd say, um, would have not been able to enjoy something that I thought was off. But the show and experience, and just knowing that I have a limited amount of time on this earth, you know, I don't have time to waste not enjoying myself. And if people want help, they can get that help. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. But yeah, sometimes, and I say sometimes, I'm not perfect and I'm not always right. And there have been plenty of times that I've made suggestions to people to, just like this should be something that we look into. And they say, I don't think we're going to go with that. We have a coaching group called Keyholder Coaching Groups. It's a mastermind for coffee shop owners. And I remember all of us in the group, including me, were like to one member, I don't think should you open this drive through? I don't know if this is a good opportunity. It's kind of weird. You're doing a lot right now. She totally ignored us. And we were all so, and I was the first one to say, and we all said it. We're so glad you did, because ultimately she knew whether she communicated all the information or not. But I'm glad for that. And so sitting down in a cafe, I can, if I get really bad service and the places, like sticky tables and, nasty bathrooms and that kind of thing, I'd say at this point, par for the course. There's this like negative white noise that we expect to be part of a cafe experience.
Oh, that's
But
depressing.
it is. I used to travel with a shim, like a little rubber shim in my backpack for these tables. And I talked about it on the show, but customers think that as well. I always talk about this. Like customers walk into coffee shops and they've been hurt by coffee in the past, whether they know it or not. And they bring that in with the expectation that if that your cafe will be the same thing. Now, if you remove those things, then they take notice. They're like, something is different about this. I don't know what it is, but it feels eerily like good. And hopefully more coffee shops are like that. But I take also a lot of time now to really consider how, just like any other human being, I can be petty about my experiences. and try to think about what is the redeeming and praiseworthy aspect of this particular experience, because some of my favorite coffee experiences have not been in the cleanest of places. They haven't been in the white tile walled succulent coffee shops of Nordic fame. Nothing wrong with that. um, but so there's something under the surface that is so valuable that somebody walking in right away can't grab it. And you might argue that that's almost better in some ways. Yeah, first impressions are good, but what's under the surface for the people who are regulars, the value of the relationships and the history of an really established and community driven cafe that doesn't tick all of the technical boxes of what a great cafe should be, still is a great cafe. So I'm open to a variety of expressions. I think what I don't like is um, things that are lacking intention and are assumptive, that are people last, that are antithetical to certain values I think coffee shops should have. And so that intentionality, the humility, the servant heart toward people that work there in a team spirit and excellence, that comes in all shapes and sizes. So I'm still shedding some of the petty, you know. Yeah, long answer to a short question.
Sure, but some of the petty is essential to being somebody who's on the outside looking in, as a and helping others get to the point where when someone else walks in, they're not feeling that way. I think you need to maintain that balance of petty and
Mm,
generous. The word that I think gets oft overused, but feels like what you might have been describing is kind of a sincere authenticity.
mm,
You can feel that when you go into a place.
yeah,
I liken it to being on vacation in a well touristed area, and the difference in service between a place where they know that you're a tourist and they don't, that's how they treat you, versus this is how we treat everyone that comes in regardless, and whether they're local or from far away. And you can feel that. Shout out to a place called Adula that I was just at, that brought that energy to the
nice.
table.
Well, and the other thing I'll add there, by the way, is that competitions and Instagram and et cetera, all the other places you can kind of compare your concept against concepts, they're inspiring in some ways, but they're also really detrimental, because the competition we should be having, it sounds trite today, is with yourself, how to be a better version of yourself, but also how are you thriving in your community? Because you could be a super profitable, very well loved and thriving cafe and never be recognized and not fall in line with, you're not going to be voted the best coffee shop. So it's a war between being, recognition and working for better reasons than simple recognition, because recognition has created a lot of homogenous coffee shop concepts across the world, but is it effective? Is it life giving? And yeah, I challenge people in coaching sometimes, and when I assess cafes, because often I will go to a cafe and we'll sit there for days and just come up with some points and reports that will help guide our coaching afterwards with the owners. And some things that initially are part of what you imagine is what they want from their cafe, you question it and they're like, yeah, we don't know why we do that. And it's just it was never something intentional, it just kind of happened. And that's what we're talking about here. How can you curate the experience so the things that you're presenting to people, including yourself, is in the form that you are proud of, and is not just this um, you know templated fill in the blank thing that is kind of a cop out.
Hmm. But might get the recognition that maybe you think is important.
Yeah,
And there's a social media internet age aspect to that, where you can see instantly what people are doing around the world and compare yourself, whereas
yeah,
before you might have been living a bit in a vacuum. And the expansiveness of your vision was maybe not limited. You certainly could travel or explore or research and do all those things, but you didn't see it in such mass quantity. And at some point, I, for myself and in all things that I do, had to realize there's probably somebody else out there doing this. They might even be doing it better. So if I'm doing it, I have to do it for myself. And
Mm,
if that doesn't work for me, or I can't make that work in my life, I can't just be doing it because I want to beat so and so on Instagram or whatever platform you're
yeah.
on, because
You
I
you
never, you never will.
you no, there's no way, and there's no award. There's no like, guess what? Ryan beat someone on Instagram. I mean, it doesn't happen. But the other thing about this that everyone has to realize is that you look at the people opening all these shops and these palatial spreads of equipment and countertops and weird shapes and sizes and stuff, and you don't really know if they're making money. You don't know if they're treating their staff well. You don't know if they're happy.
Hmm.
It's just as likely that they might not be as they are. So we fill in the blank like, well, it must be nice to be like a super successful coffee shop opening all these locations. But what happened during COVID? Some of these places just closed all of their locations because none of them were making money. They were all liabilities. In yeah, emphasis on the lie, right?
Well, and also they didn't have a foundational support to keep them going. To some
Yeah.
extent, they hadn't built that. If I've learned anything about business finance from the last 5 years, it's the goal isn't to make money. The goal is to have the potential to make money, so other people give you money. But I could be wrong on
I
that.
like that.
I think that's an old Silicon Valley TV show bit. If you make money, then people can say, "Oh, you're not making enough." But if you don't make any money, then you can say, "Oh, we have the potential," and
Yeah.
people will invest in you. That being said, there's more to the world, I think, than hospitality and coffee shops. I believe you mentioned you were partnered. What's your life like outside of consulting, outside of the industry? Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I am a person of faith. I belong to a local church here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I have long dabbled in the guitar. Of nothing crazy, nothing amazing, but those who don't play the guitar tell me that it's great, and so I take solace in that. I do a lot of hiking, and what I consider a lot of hiking in between when I can do it. So whenever I'm traveling, I like to get out into nature as much as possible. I'm married. My wife is a artist, potter, awesome person, and my son Roman is 10 going on 11. We are reading a lot together. We're making our way through all the Redwall books. It's a series by a English author named Brian Jakes. Fantastic fantasy series about mice that live in an abbey, defend themselves against rats and stoats and stuff. 22 books. We're on book 16 now.
Wow, you're cruising.
And yeah.
I was going to ask that. I see quite a few books behind you and on the shelves. If you were to grab one, if they were to look at that shelf and say, "This is the book that stands out to me,"
Oh, wow.
what would it be?
Okay. Well, I'm going to turn around here and see if I can just grab one. We'll grab two.
There's always room for one more book.
Yeah,
Always.
I know. There's a lot of like management books, but there's also a lot of literature, and there's a lot of different like theology or kind of Christian books and stuff. This one I picked up is a book of poetry by Tennyson. It's a no one can see this because it's an audio podcast, but it's one of these. Somebody gave me a gift card for one of those rare and antiquated book websites, but this one was from 1882. It's very ornate and beautiful. And I like to read that kind of classic poetry whenever I get the opportunity. There's another book, actually unintentionally, by another poet, modern poet named David White. It's a book called Crossing the Unknown Sea. It's about the journey of identity through vocation.
Hmm.
And he has a lot of books on the journey of the midlife, and he's a great poet, and I think a great thinker in these transitional states of life. But this book I've recommended to a lot of people, as it was recommended to me. in the professional world. Because as you said in your question, there's the layouts and equipment, but then there's the emotional side. There is something about keeping in touch with your humanity and being rooted in something greater than yourself that helps you find solace in the waves and the winds of your professional world and your personal world. So the reason I walk, probably like 4 or 5 miles in the morning, we live near a park, to do that, is partly because there's a need, especially I'm 46 now, and I really need to be able to ground myself before launching into the day and use that time. I'll speak into my phone. I'll pray, I'll think, I'll put down ideas. And it's just invigorating to do so because it reminds you of what's valuable in your life. What are you even doing this for? I mean, there are years of my life that I spent behind the bar surviving on nothing but, raspberry oat bars and espresso and doing like double shifts all the time. And unto what? That's a good question to always ask. Like, what is this? What's this for? And so I find myself asking that more often these days, especially as opportunities can come up more and more with consulting or the podcast. I have to sort through a lot of that stuff and figure out how to best serve, and not just serve the audience, but how do I serve my family with what I'm doing? And if you're an operator of a business or just a person with a career, what are you doing it for? Is it serving you? And if not, some action needs to be taken to get yourself over the hump and take the brave step to change something so that maybe you would do less, but you feel better and you're serving something that now gives life. You're doing something that gives life to you. So that meandered a bit, but
No, I relate to that idea of I am somebody, I describe myself sometimes as a creative raccoon. I see something shiny and I want to grab onto it and not let go. But then I see something else shiny and I try to grab onto that too. And now I'm holding five things and none of them are really serving each other or myself because my attention is split so
yeah,
far. You have to find ways to make that work in your life if that's who you are. But I certainly appreciate the idea of taking time to figure it out. What is the thing that is motivating me? Am I doing this because it's who I am, because it's something I believe in or I'm passionate about? Or am I doing it because it's the thing that I'm supposed to do when I wake up? And is that enough? And that's a challenging question to ask.
yeah. And to that, the thing that keeps me consistent with the show, for example, is sometimes and often is the idea that there is a message to send out. There is a voice to platform and to talk about something important to the most people possible that will give the most life and opportunity for success as possible. And then there's some days where I'm just like, man, screw this. You know, like I am so tired and I have nothing and it was a disaster, and this week was terrible. But then I realized I've got sponsors and they have a contract. And sometimes, literally, the only thing that would keep me going is the fact that there is a legal obligation. That's exactly the way it is to run a business, I think, because you can't always ride high on the rainbows and sunshine of your aspirations. Sometimes it's just the gritty duty that you have to do this because you have to do this. And I'm so glad for that because um, we have an episode called In Praise of Long-Term Employment. And I get the feeling that a lot of the generation of baristas that don't have the luxury of working in an imperfect place for 5 years will never get to see the kind of maturation in themselves or their perspective on the industry because they constantly reset the gauge and chase something that it really could have been achieved if you had just stuck with something a little longer. Not saying toxic situations should just be put up with, but you know, long-term employment forces you to have to face yourself a lot of times. Doing this now for 8 years, which is wild to say, uh, has shown me that it's the consistency is part of the reason why I think I might be a better person today than when I first started. I've learned so much and changed so much. So it shapes you as much as you shape it. And so when people start a coffee shop, they say, there's this business plan. This is what we want to do. This is our 3-5 year plan. And you just have to laugh, not laugh, of course, but just say, your coffee shop will not look like that. It is a co-created entity. It is the idea is a seed, but the environment is the thing that shapes the tree. You in a way, you'll never know. Nobody has ever really reached their full potential. The wind will push it this way. There'll be a forest fire. There's going to be all sorts of things that influence the way it looks. But when you look out there and you see the wildness of nature and the force and the majesty of it all, you don't think, gosh, I guess it could have been so much better. You just think, that's really cool.
I have, if anyone would like one, I have scores of business plans in a folder somewhere. You're welcome to have them. Good luck. We've spent 45 minutes chatting already, and there's a million other things that we could talk about. But I want to make sure that I get to this before we close. You've talked about the longevity of Keys to the Shop, 8 years looking backwards. What does looking forward look like for you?
Well, it's very good chance, Lord willing, it'll be, we could get up to another 8 years, could be 10, 20 years of doing this show. And by that time, what I really hope to have accomplished is to take what we have put out there in the form of episodes and curate it into something a lot more manageable for people to enter into with less scrolling. It's really difficult to try to aggregate all that stuff and put it in categories. So that's topmost in my mind is, now that we've amassed such a large library, what do we do to catalog that in a way that's helpful, like, yet again? So it's kind of iterating on what we have and making it more available. I want to start entering into more, the webinar space and offering more access to consulting and services and products. We don't have any consulting products right now. It's just me working with people. That's all we do. Except for the key holder coaching groups, which have been really great. We're on our third season of those. That mastermind group lasts for 6 months. And I see that community growing because the community part of it is one of the most it's one of the most gratifying and life-giving parts of it. There was a lot of good information shared in our mastermind groups. They all support one another, and I offer some suggestions as well from the sidelines. But I'm a facilitator of these things, and owners are an isolated bunch of people. A lot like roasters, and uh, when you meet other people who can identify with you and encourage you and push, maybe even push back and hold you accountable and that stuff, it's really helpful. So to me, it feels like, how can I create more value? I'm not the type of person who says, okay, what's the starter pack for an influencer? And I'm just going to plug Keys to the Shop into that. And maybe that's holding me back from something. I don't know. But I tend to be slow to jump into the funnels and all the other stuff. So, and for good reason, because I think I always want sincerity and humility and proof of value for the people interacting with this brand of Keys to the Shop to be obvious. And yeah, so the future, in some sense, who knows? I mean, I'm just a better version of what we are today. And it could take different shapes, but I feel like it's been a good ride, and we'll see how long it keeps going.
Being a entrepreneur and a busy person with a family and kids and all the hiking, I'm assuming you still get out occasionally to order a cup of coffee or stop at a coffee shop. What do
Mm-hmm.
you order when you're just stopping for yourself?
Espresso. Just a shot of espresso. Yeah.
Anything I didn't ask today that you want to make sure that we share?
No, not necessarily. Where I'm always open to having conversations with people, and if people want to reach out, feel free. It's Chris at keystotheshop.com and just at keys to the shop on YouTube and also Instagram. But yeah, I'm more conversations is what I'm after, and creating more good in the world of coffee. So yeah, this was fun.
I'm glad, Chris. I certainly appreciate the time and just sharing a little bit of your story, and I'm excited to go through all of that back catalog on my own time. Okay, I'm going to give you a few key takeaways here, but head to roastwestcoast.com to see a bunch more in the newsletter. Chris is a longtime industry veteran, and his role has changed over the years, but his connection to coffee has remained constant. Keys to the Shop is a podcast and a consulting company. Listen to that voice. That's a true podcaster's voice. And the show is a direct result of his desire to give back to the industry in the form of education. I mean, he has 900 plus podcast episodes for you to catch up on, so you better get started. Just kidding. Don't get overwhelmed. Whatever level you're at or whatever question you've got, Keys to the Shop probably has done a show about that. So check out the archives on the Keys to the Shop website. Link in the show notes, or if you're listening through the newsletter, right below this audio stream. Both the podcast and his efforts as a consultant offer Chris an opportunity to be a servant to the industry, to expand the general knowledge and success of others by sharing what he knows and by sharing his platform, enabling others to offer up their knowledge as well. On a more individual case-by-case basis, he sees his role as being the throttle that ensures his consulting clients are slowing down just enough to be moving forward with intention. Or on the other side of that, stepping on the gas, enabling them to provide an experience that creates successful relationships between them, their employees, customers, community, and themselves. We also chatted about the dangers of comparison, especially now in the social media age. Before you compare your thing, your cafe or your coffee experience to someone else's thing, remember, you don't know what it's like in reality. You don't know if they're making money. You don't know if they're treating their employees well, or even if they're just happy in general. Keep your focus on adjusting your path so that it ends up being the right one for you. And this is just a little bit of a note based on a comment that we made near the end of the show about pandemic closures. Businesses close for all kinds of reasons. The pandemic and post-pandemic related closures weren't always due to a lack of foundational support, or in some cases a failure of any kind, other than not preparing for a worldwide shutdown, which created the need for a much longer emergency runway than most businesses or individuals account for. The lack of transparency in the early days about the reality of the shutdowns, in particular the expected length, also slowed the on-the-ground response at most cafes and restaurants. No one had been through anything like that in generations. But now we have. The risk of another pandemic hasn't gone away, and the experience of living through it may help those rising up in the industry now by making them really consider their off-ramps, support systems, and financial needs. Finally today, is Louisville the home to Keys to the Shop, an underrated coffee hotbed? I'll let you discuss in the comments. That's our show for today. Thanks to Chris for sharing his time, story, and dropping some knowledge on us. You can find a longer recap in our newsletter at roastwestcoast.com. And be sure to click the links to the Keys to the Shop podcast and their website in our show notes. It's easy to find online if you just want to search for it, keystotheshop.com. And if you're already there following them, it really helps us if you tap the follow button on our show too, or give us a few stars if you're already following, on whatever platform you happen to be listening. If you want to go beyond to support the Coffee People podcast, we always say the best way to support our show is to tell a friend about us, share an episode, or one of our newsletters on roastwestcoast.com. We're always telling our friends about Roastar Coffee packaging, found at roastar.com. They are this show's presenting sponsor, and they've helped us tell the big story of a bunch of small businesses and have been an incredible support developing this platform where we share your stories, the stories of coffee people. They also have a pretty impressive new design lab. Again, check out roastery.com. This show is also supported by some great coffee industry partners: Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Maria Coffee, Cape Horn Green Coffee Importers, Crossings Coffee, Hasea Coffee Source, Ignite Coffee Company, Ascend Coffee Roasters, Me and My Uncle Coffee, Craft 42 Roasters, Relative Coffee Company, our partners in the Yeah No Yeah Coffee we mentioned at the top, and Cozy Canine Coffee. Thank you for listening, sharing this podcast, asking us questions, and generally just being curious about coffee. This show, the Coffee People Podcast, is part of our Roast West Coast Coffee Network. And this episode has been written, produced, researched, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Wherever you find yourself today, I hope it's with a fine cup of coffee. Thank you for listening to us tell the stories of coffee people. Cheers, everyone. If you are in the early stages of your coffee journey, we want to support you. Check out the Coffee Smarter Education podcasts. Coffee Smarter is designed to enable coffee drinkers to brew a better cup of coffee at home. And Coffee Smarter Pro covers industry-specific topics for baristas, roasters, shop owners, and aspiring coffee professionals. You'll find both shows on your favorite podcast platforms or on our website at coffeesmarterpodcast.com.